In today's video, we're going to go over a few more cloner techniques with the effectors as well as some of the new animator tools. I made this based off my last video, which is the cloner material video. I did want to do a breakdown of the animation I did for that as well as a few other techniques. So this is a bit more intermediate, but it's super easy. I'm sort of into the whole cloner vibe at the moment just because I've been re-inspired with the new tools and Unreal. It's just honestly just fun to make. If you do have any of your own setups, please tag me because I love seeing that type of stuff. And let's just get started. Okay, so we're going to look at this first setup. I'm in Unreal Engine 5.4.1, and you might recognize this scene from my previous cloner material video. As for the actual scene setup itself, just a super basic HDRI gray backdrop, which I'll link in the description below. And I've also got this gobo light setup here, which really simple. I'm actually going to make a video on how to make gobo lights and animated gobos and stuff like that, so keep an eye out for that one. Okay, so I'm sure you saw in the intro, the setup for this is kind of going to be this like generative cube sort of procedural animated look. And for the actual cloner setup, very simple. I just have this box. So simple cube with some beveled corners. I've then put it in a cloner that is on the grid setup, and then these are the settings for the grid. Again, one in the thickness and then 10 by 10. As far as the material goes, watch my cloner material video if you want to know how to like have control over the color palette and like, you know, the gradient fall off on the edges and stuff like that. And then for the logo thing of my channel, it's just this decal that I've placed onto the cloner. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is actually add a bit of randomness to the clones. So just select your cloner here, go down, and then go to this range checkbox, and then select that. And now you'll notice there's actually a bit of variation in how the cubes are set up. So if I turn it on and off, you can see it just adds a bit of depth to the scene and like a bit of randomness that gives a little more shadows and highlights that just add some more detail to the visual. And I've added very small values, so just -1 and 1 in the X, and then -1 and 1 in the rotational blue or Z channel. Let's first add the random cube size thing. So to do that, let's go to spawn linked effector, which should make this guy by default. Again, just make sure your motion design mode is on so that everything's working. And if you don't have it on, I probably should have said this at the start, just go to your plugins and then enable the motion design mode. So by default, it'll make this sphere, which is pretty cool, but that's not the look we're after. The first thing I'm gonna do is change it to a box, and then also just take the offset from 100 down to 0 because we will be changing the size. So the first thing I actually want to do is let me check the width of this box. So I just want to change the width, which should be this guy. Yep. So I'm just going to go to my top view and then zero out these guys and then maybe bring him down here. So the width should be around there. 290, I would say. Maybe 300. Yeah, just to encompass the whole thing. And then I'll bring the box in the middle. Also, to come into the top view, I just hit Alt-J. So Alt-J to go into the top view and then Alt-G to go back into perspective. Or you can just use these guys up here and use those shortcuts. So just a quick tip. And because I don't want any actual fall off on the blockiness of the cubes, I'm gonna make the inner and outer extents the exact same. So what I mean by that is, let me just bring this guy in. So you can see that outer rectangle is the outer extent and this inner one is the inner extent, obviously. So maybe somewhere there. So what is that, like a 10? And then I'll bring the outer extent to a 10. Cool. So now you can see the box encompasses our whole cloner setup. Now, if we change something in this effector, it should affect everything in our cloner. So if we change the scale, it'll change the scale of all of our cubes. So now you might be wondering, how do we make each cube random? Well, let me first just put this on a value of 2. And then let's go to our easing settings. So this is where this becomes very useful. So if we go down to random, now this pretty much assigns a random value to each of the clones within the box. So now if I move this effector out of the way, you can kind of see what it's doing here if you look on the left screen. Also, I just realized even though we changed the size of the box, I could have just made it unbound and it would have done the exact same thing, but you know, just in case you want to animate this coming in and out, this could be an option that you could do. Let's play around with the size a bit so you can find a size that you like. I think my original one was like 2.25. And then let me make the box a bit thicker. So 110 and then make this 110. And you could always play with the fall off, you know, of the inner extent. So something like this, as you can see here, if I adjust these, you can see the randomness is at its strongest in the middle and then sort of falls off, which is also a really cool look. So definitely play around with your inner and outer extent. The random is the main key to this effect. And now if you remember in the intro video, they're sort of blinking around, like the sizes change every second. And it's almost as if the seed is changing. If I go to this cloner, you can see if I type 1, it's a different setup, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's kind of that generative cube look that I was going for. So we're going to animate this in sequencer, but in a much easier way. And if you watched my bouncing ball animation video, you'll know what we'll do. So first, let me just save real quick. Now I'm in like a fresh sequence in the motion design mode. So you can just use the same thing. First thing I'll do is just drag my camera in. Also, I'm just going to change this to 30 FPS, go to frame 300 to make it 10 seconds, and then just drag my camera cut on either side of the extents. Now I'm just going to go to the beginning of the sequence, press F to frame your whole timeline, your in and out point. And then I'm just going to select my cloner and then go to seed and then put a keyframe for seed. And then I'm going to go to frame 30, which is 1 second, and then put 1. So as you can see, after 1 second, it changes. Actually, you know what? I might put it at frame 15, so half a second. So half a second, it changes. Now, what you can do is select this final keyframe, go to your curve editor. Let's select the seed. And that's where you can see that's that second keyframe we made. So just select that second keyframe, go to this button here, choose how the curve is evaluated if sampled after the last key. So we're pretty much telling it what do we want the keyframe to do after this, after frame 15. And what we want it to do is cycle with offset. So what that means is it's just going to keep adding 1. So say you went from 0 to 3, it'll go 0, 3, 6, 9. So it'll just be sequential and keep adding whatever this first setup is to the next. So that way you don't need to add every key manually. And it also means, so let me first just show you. So now every half a second, our seed is changing. And what that also means is you can easily readjust the timing. So now, for example, say I wanted at 1 second instead, because maybe you've got a music loop and the BPM changes or something. You can now, so every second, this cloner seed will change. So that is step 1 to this setup. Really cool, really simple to do. Now the next thing we'll do is kind of get those blocks kind of blinking in and out from the intro video. So first let me get my effector and rename it. So this will be FX brick, and then I'll call it scale because it is randomly changing the scale. And now let's go back to my cloner and do another spawn linked effector. So it'll do the exact same thing. So it'll spawn this guy. And again, I'm just gonna go to box and then turn the offset down to 0 because we will not be animating the movement. And then let me also just make the size. Yeah, something like that should be good. And then what we want to do is make the scale 0. So this is where we kind of get that look of cloners coming in and out. Obviously, you don't want to go through the trouble of like hand animating each one. You might want to if you have like a specific path that you want it to move. But we're going to use the new animator. What do you call this? Just the new animators. If you don't have this window, just go up to window and then motion, operator stack right under motion design outliner and just have that checked on. Also, always make sure you save. So now we have this effector, and let me just also rename it. So fx_brick. I'll just call it invis because it's kind of hiding it. And then 1. And let's select our brick, add animator, and then I want to add an oscillate, and then I'll do the YZ location. And the reason I'm doing YZ is because I don't want it to go back and forth. I just want it to move side to side or up and down. So obviously right now, not the greatest look. First, I'm just going to uncheck Y. So now you can see how this is working. I'm just going to change the global frequency to like a 0.1. But right now it's just going way too low and way too high because the amplitude min and max values of our Z slider is too high. So let me just change this to like a -50 and a 50. And we can now probably up the global frequency because our min-max values are lower to like a 0.3. And I might even drag this up a bit and then make this like a -30 and 30. And then again, make the frequency higher. Cool. So now we've kind of got a moving effector. Now let's do the same thing with our Y value. So I'm gonna make this very little. So like a -5 and a 5, because I don't want too much movement. Even maybe like a -10 and 10, just to get a bit more of like a diagonal movement to it. And then we can hit save. So now we've got one effector done. And what we can do is actually just duplicate this. So now we have effects brick invis 2. And we can move this guy maybe somewhere to the top left. Go back to our cloner and then let's add that guy in. So click add, ignore all these top ones. They're like old ones I've got turned off. And then let's find invis 2 that we just made. So cool, now we've got another effector that is working in the top left corner. Now maybe this one you want a bit bigger or faster. So let's select that invis 2, go to the operator stack, and I might make this like a 1. And you can see here it's moving in and out. And I might move this more like to the center here or like the bottom corner. And then we can even make the Z values a little higher for this. So -40 and 40. And then drag him more central. And then maybe change the frequency down to like a 0.7. And again, this is where you can change the width and stuff like that. So I'm just going to change maybe the width to be 15, 15, and then this to be 25 in the height as well. So it's more like thinner and taller. And then you could put it somewhere there. So that kind of gives you that look as well. And right now they're a little too similar in movement. And if you want to offset them, you can go up to the random time offset. So just click any of your effectors, go to the random time offset, and then just put like a 2 in the seed. And then in this one, random time offset, this can be like a 1. Or something like that. And you can also play with the oscillate function. So this is quite cool. So in one of my versions, I actually did a square oscillate function. So that and then square. So what that does is it blinks the effectors around. So now I might change this up to like a 2 and then this to a 1. And now you can kind of see, if we look at it in conjunction with our sequence, it's kind of working in tandem with that seed effect, but right now it's a little slow. So I might make it up to 2. And then you can see it's sort of changing with our seed timing. Now I'm just going to change it back to sine and then sine on this as well. And then again, we can add another one. So let me add another one going left to right. So again, always save, you never know if it'll crash. Control D to duplicate. Let me go to my cloner, add a new guy, invis 3. And you'll notice this bug happening. And it can happen when you have overlapping effectors that also have animators on them. So to fix that, you just want to hit update in the cloner until it goes away. Or if that doesn't work, you actually just want to move one of the effectors out and then hit update again. There we go. So it can be a bit buggy at the moment, but just don't be afraid to constantly update your cloner if stuff isn't working. Okay, so now we're in scene 2 and we'll go over 2 different techniques. So just a quick breakdown again. I just have this cube from Grayscale Gorilla that I've just put in a cloner, which is a grid, and then I've got my camera in a blank sequence. So for the first effect that we're going to do is we're going to do like this cool sort of noise field going through our cloners and then go back down to 0. So I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense right now, but it will, and it's very easy to do. So select your cloner after you've got your grid set up. You can also just use, no, that button, man. All right, we go again. Did I actually have straight up PTSD, man? That button, like as soon as I clicked it, dude, I knew. Okay, so we're back in the scene. Anyway, let me click my cloner and then spawn linked effector. Again, ignore all these guys, they're from another experiment. Okay, so obviously it'll make our default spherical effector that will move or offset our clones up 100. Already kind of a cool look, especially with this setup, but what I want to go for is something sort of moving through our cloner like that. So let me just leave it in the middle. I might change the radius down to 100. I'm going to use, instead of default mode, noise field. And I'm going to use a location strength of 20 in each of the axes. And then a rotation, just a slight rotation, like 6, 3, 10 or something, whatever you want to do. And then a frequency of 10. So something like that. So I kind of want to create that look. Let's first place our spherical effector here at the bottom. Let me drag it into the scene. Let me rename it effects, sphere, noise. And then I'll just add a transform track and then a keyframe there. And then let's go change our sequence to 30 frames per second, go to frame 300. Make it 10 seconds, drag our camera cut beyond the extends, press F, and then maybe let's just go to maybe frame 60. And then we'll move our cloner to the middle, add a keyframe, and then actually, you know what, let's move that down to 1 second. And then go to frame 60 and then move it out of frame like that, and then add another keyframe. So let me actually make the out point around there. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, cool, like pretty standard. And then I kind of want it to pause in the middle for a bit and then move up. So to do that, let's go to our curve editor. Go to my sphere, and I'm just animating the Z like that. And to do that, all we got to do is grab that middle keyframe and then just sort of flatten it out, almost not fully flatten, but like maybe around there. So it's still slight curve, so it should slow down a bit there. We could also select that keyframe again, go to this toggle weighted tangents, and then maybe extend it a bit. So it just slows down for that little bit longer. And now let's take a look at it. So let me go to the start. Not bad, but maybe a bit longer. Maybe something like that. And then what we also might need to do is actually change the easing, because right now it's linear. So I think maybe trying something like an out quad could work well. Yeah, it's like... And honestly, I might need to shorten this. Let me try 45. I think I like that more. Make the out point there. Yeah, I like that speed a lot more. And then let's try a different easing method. Maybe a soft sine. Yeah, I like that speed a lot more. Cool. And I'm just using, by the way, the square brackets, the left and right square brackets to change the in and out point. And if you change the inner radius to something like 10, that'll make it a bit smaller and like a softer fall off. So that's also a really cool look. So definitely give that a go. So that is technique 1 of this second scene. So technique like 2, whatever. What am I saying? Okay, so I'm just going to disable that effector for now. And the next setup we'll do is playing around a bit more with the forces. So I'm just going to call this effects underscore sphere. Okay, cool. I'm just going to change the radius, the outer radius just to 50. So it'll be like, yeah, around that kind of size. This is already kind of a cool effect that's similar to what I was showing earlier in the video. Disable the offset thing, and then let me just move it out of the way. And if I go to something like a curl noise force, drag it in, you can kind of see we can play around a bit and have some cool movement and stuff happening. So that's quite simple, and what you can do is just animate that. So you can change some of the settings. So something I did try is actually changing it from from 1000 to -1000. And what that does is you can see it sort of like pushes it away or goes inside. So then if you do that, I'm just going to disable it. If you use that in conjunction with gravity force, so gravity just kind of makes it drop. So if I make the gravity -3000 instead of 980, turn it on and off, curl noise, turn that on, you can kind of see what it'll do. It'll like make it sort of fall off really quick, but also give it a bit of movement as well. And I'll show you in the other sequence how it worked. So what I've done in my other sequence for the intro video is I've just keyframed the position of that spherical effector. So it kind of ends up looking like this. So I've just got the sphere moving through it, kind of as if like an invisible force is just like shaving off and knocking cubes off. And if I go into my other viewport, you can kind of see the animation I've done there. So I've just moved it around, and then these are the keyframes. And what I've done with the camera movement, if I go back to the beginning, is I've just got some camera movements that match the movement of my effector. Also, quick tip, the annoying thing with the effectors, especially if you use the force, is say, okay, now I've done this and this is what my viewport looks like. I constantly have to click my cloner and then force update it, which can be annoying in a sequencer when you're trying to fine tune things and you have to constantly force update. So what I've done is at the beginning here, I've just keyframed the enable, or like the enable checkbox. So this guy here, so that sort of does its own force update. It pretty much just toggles it on and off. So at the beginning, negative frame 2 to frame 0 or whatever, negative frame 1 to frame 0, I've just keyframed it. So that means whenever I go to the beginning of my sequence, it resets itself. So super useful tip there. And there is just one more thing that I want to show you that kind of links back to what I was teaching at the beginning. Oh, weird to say teach. So for the final effect that I want to show is something like this, where the cloner is sort of slowly building up and spawning in over time. And it's also, some of the clones slowly die off as well after a certain random amount of time. So I gotta stop saying so much. So you want to go to your cloner and scroll all the way down to spawn and lifetime. So if I go to spawn and I just go to infinite, you can see it keeps spawning things every 3 seconds on top of each other. So that's not what we want. So we go to loop mode infinite and then behavior rate. And what that does is it spawns each clone at this rate. So 50 is very slow, 500 is super fast, 1000 is even faster. So you can kind of create this like Lego brick kind of animation. So I'm just going to set it back to 150. Now, the thing is, once it gets to the top, it's just going to start again from the bottom and overlap. You can change that by setting it from infinite to multiple. So you could only have it spawn again a certain amount of times, like loop over a certain amount of times, but I'm just going to stick with infinite for now. And then to get that sort of trailing effect, this is where you use the lifetime settings. So I've set my min and max lifetime to be either half a second or 5 seconds, so anywhere in between. And you can see that just randomly has a lifetime to each clone. So this is pretty much a Niagara effect because you can do this with particles. What this does is, if I go to the beginning, this now sort of slowly despawns clones as it trails off and kind of leaves this cool trail behind as things are spawning. And then you can also enable scale. So you can see once I enable scale, it kind of scales in and out over time based on the min and max rate of the value. And then if I up the rate of the spawn rate, you can kind of get these cool effects of things coming up and like slowly scaling down. You could imagine like particles coming off of a really fast moving object or something like that. So these are just some cool techniques I've been playing around with the new cloner. Again, if you do make some cool stuff, please tag me. I love seeing the stuff you guys make. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.